Vladimir Putin may have marched into Ukraine. Iran and the world powers are on the brink of a nuclear deal, and much of the Middle East is in flames as Islamic State battles fellow Muslims in Iraq and Syria. But these tumultuous turns in world affairs have hardly touched the British general election campaign. David Cameron, Ed Miliband and the rest are much more interested in the economy, the health service, immigration and, north of the border, a resurgent Scottish nationalism. Many suspect this reflects a deeper national mood. Britain has tired of becoming embroiled in far-off conflicts. But is Britain now punching well below its weight? With me is Robin Niblett, Director of Chatham House. Robin, are we looking at a country reflected in this election that's pulling back from the world, that's tired of a global role?
I think elections are difficult times to judge a country's position globally, because inevitably the turn is to domestic issues, unless you're threatened with immediate evasion, which the UK isn't. But I think there is a sense to which the country is taking a time out, and the British public almost want a time out, sit back, as I might say, on the reserve bench of international affairs rather than being in the front line. So I think there is a shift, but I think the election isn't the best way of judging.
But is it a time out? You know, we're talking about possibly, if the Conservatives win, a referendum on whether we should be part of Europe. We see the Americans saying, look, you're not really punching your weight in West Africa or the Middle East. Is it a time out, or is it a prelude to a reassessment of our responsibilities around the world?
The first point I'd make is I think all countries are finding it incredibly difficult to use their tools of diplomacy or military force to have any kind of influence internationally. And the United States, and there are many Americans that are critical of Britain right now for pulling back, are finding it incredibly difficult to do anything particularly meaningful in international affairs other than Iran, hopefully, on the international stage. So I think all countries are reassessing what are the tools of influence, the tools of power. In the UK's case, the decision, which I think is a political one, to play with the future of the UK's membership of the EU is really important, and is the one issue, along with the potential breakup of the United Kingdom, that I think is giving people real pause for thought about the UK's long-term influence.
But if you look back in the whole sort of post-war period, there really, well, since we joined the EU, there have been twin anchors of our foreign policy: the security relationship with the United States, the business and political relationship with the rest of Europe. We hear Americans now saying, well, look, you're not even going to commit to spend 2% of GDP, the NATO target, on defence. You hear Europeans saying, even if you stay in, you've really left, psychologically, you've left the European Union because you're not a player. Look at Ukraine, for example, where Germany and France are doing all the heavy lifting. So, you know, aren't we talking about some pretty fundamental structural changes here?
Yes. I mean, I think the structural change, which, as you said, is not coming up in the election, is that Britain's trying to reposition itself as still being a great power to a certain extent. It's a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It's one of the recognized nuclear powers, but it's realizing that its capacity to be influential is hugely limited. And I think if you take Europe in particular, whatever happened, the UK was going to be moving to the fringes slightly of the European Union, because the UK is not in the Eurozone. And America, in turn, looks at Britain and says, well, hold on, you're not critical to Europe, so where are you critical?
Well, I know Chatham House has been doing some serious work on how Britain can reposition itself. But, you know, can we, if you like, downsize in international relations and still be a serious player? And does that mean, for example, we've got to keep Trident, or as some people say, the Trident nuclear deterrent, some people say actually lose it and concentrate our defence spending on more, if you like, practical things?
I think the UK is going to be schizophrenic for a number of years, because on the one hand, neither the United States nor any of the major parties in the UK wants to give up the nuclear deterrent, because the UK is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. If you don't have that nuclear deterrent, in essence, you cease having that role. A country the size of Britain wouldn't be able to keep it. But I think any government that comes into power after May the 7th is going to find itself wanting to play a global role that is not dependent entirely on the EU or on the United States. We've seen this already with the UK trying to take a lead on joining the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which the Chinese have proposed. So it wants to be involved in procurement, infrastructure, some of the commercial growth of the world. It wants to be a leader on cybersecurity and held big conferences and being a global leader in that space. On the development agenda, the UK is 0.7%, one of the largest development spenders in the world. And I think its G7 presidency, open procurement, open government, avoiding tax evasion. These are kind of global agenda items, not transatlantic, not tied in with great power politics, and could be a defining character of British foreign policy in the future.
Okay, so there's a possibility, an important niche. Robin Niblett, thank you very much.